Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning?
Fantastic.
Good. Welcome back. We're super glad that you are here. My name is Reverend Michael Roque, and I cannot possibly tell you how honored and excited and thrilled that I get to get up here and have this amazing experience where we all come together and collectively we get to create whatever it is that we want to create, right? So I want you to think about this for a minute. It's a crazy concept that we actually can create our own reality. And when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of unity and what unity stands for, it's the understanding that thoughts are things, that thoughts create things. And when you take it to one step further, which is where I get super excited, is when you start thinking about the idea of connecting with this thing inside of yourself, which is called your heart, your soul, and then all of a sudden you have that experience, and then you take it one step further where it's like, well, wait a minute, if I could do that, then there's a possibility that I can connect with something even greater than myself, which is God or the divine, right? We don't get hung up with a lot of language in here in terms of, well, I've got to use the exact word, because if I don't use the exact word or say the exact thing, then I'm going to screw this thing up. Spoiler alert, you can't screw this up. Not possible. If there is something inside of your heart that says, I want to have more of an expression, I feel this thing that's tapping me on the shoulder that's my divinity saying, hey, I think I'm more than this. I'm not going to buy the narrative that's been jammed down my throat from my parents and society and religion and all this other stuff. And I'm going to trust that there's something inside of me that is your God-given right to spend time with, and then all of a sudden you can connect with that and then look out. Because I promise you this, if you spend time doing that, your life will change. Without a doubt. And it's not going to look like anything that you've probably heard about or read about. Because it's your own path within, and then there's finally this connection with your soul. And then the dance that you get to have with your soul is magical. It is magical. It is limitless in terms of the possibilities, in terms of what you're able to create in your own world. And that's exactly what the Fillmores, who created Unity, taught. And there's been others who have taught the same thing. But Unity, when you really think about it, is really a spiritual philosophy. It's a practice. It's kind of like Buddhism is a practice. Unity is a practice. Yes, the Fillmores did read the Bible. Yes, we read the Bible. We take stories from it. However, what we really believe is it's a practice. It's about a spiritual practice. And when you can wrap your mind around that hold on, I'm a spiritual being having this experience. There's these things called spiritual tools that when I can use them, then all of a sudden I can have a pretty amazing experience. And life actually can become pretty fun, pretty amazing, pretty limitless in terms of the expression and what that feels like. And it doesn't matter what that looks like for you. As I always say, that expression, that experience is going to be very, very different for each and every one of us. In other words, guess what? Contrary to common belief, there is no one size fits all. There isn't. So then your job is to figure out, well, wait a minute, what does my size look like? Because I promise you, it's going to be a little bit different for you than it is for me. And you know what? Again, contrary to common belief, that's okay. It really, really is. The key is listen to your heart. Listen to your soul. Listen to your divinity calling you forward and saying, what's next for you? What does the next expression, what does the next expansion look like for you? Because when you start to ask those questions, and then you listen, and then you do something about whatever it is that you're told or shared with, magic. And that's what life should be. It should be magical. It should be fun. It should be a lot of good things shared with a lot of good people, right? So, having said that, I'm really, really happy to see each and every one of you. Thank you for spending the time here this morning with us. Let's create something pretty amazing this morning, shall we? Can I get an agreement? Can we do that together? Can we? Yeah, let's do that. As many of you know, we've been playing with this idea or this thought about the spiritual lessons in each one of the seasons. And so the last time I spoke, I started to talk about the different spiritual lessons that spring has for us. And again, why are we doing this? We're tying all this into the medicine wheel, which is what we've been studying over the last couple of months. And just a real quick recap of what we did in the last talk. We talked about this idea of spring being about creation, that we are co-creators with God. And the truth is, we don't just create in the spring, we create every single day of our lives, truthfully. And so how do we, as being co-creators with God, how does that happen? What are the mechanics behind it? And so we started talking about this. And what I did was I used this analogy of a farmer. And the farmer's sitting in front in the spring looking at this wide open field. And all of a sudden the farmer has to look at that and go, well, what do I want to plant? That's what the farmer does. So the first thing the farmer does is figure out what he's going to plant. And then what we did is we talked about this idea of using unity principles, 12 powers, and how could you connect that? How could you do that? And so what we did is we started to incorporate some of the 12 powers into the discussion, which makes it even juicier, because I love it, right? And so the thought was, well, if you're sitting there trying to figure out what you want to create in your life, the first thing you might want to do is call on the power of, anybody remember? Imagination. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The power of imagination. You stand in the moment of infinite possibilities. Nothing is restricted in the present moment other than those limited beliefs on who and what you are and who and what you think you can do. But the truth is, as being an unlimited child of God, you have unlimited possibilities in any given moment. And so when we sit down and we open up to the idea of there being infinite possibilities, then all of a sudden, guess what? We get all these different ideas on how we can create it or what we want to create or what we want to do. But then that causes a little bit of an issue because now all of a sudden you've got what? You've got limitless possibilities in terms of what it is that you want to do. So what do we do with that? Well, what we do is we use another one of the 12 powers. Who remembers what that one is? Order? Close. Not exactly. Understanding, not bad. Will. Who said it? Will. There you go. Will. Why? What is the power of will? It's the ability to choose and lead based off of these ideas and truths and principles. So we use the power of imagination. That gives us all the ideas. How do we decide which one to pick? We use the power of will, right? And that's where we left off. So that's what we talked about the last time. But we're not done. Remember, it's spring. It's about creation. So what do we have? Imagine the analogy of the farmer. The farmer's sitting there. He's looking at his fields. All right, what do I want to plant? What do I want to create? What do I want to create in my life? We use imagination. We use the will. And then what? As I was preparing for this talk, all of a sudden I came across something I thought would be really, really super fun. So I'm going to go back into the Bible because there's a really cool story that I'd read before, but I hadn't done the metaphysical interpretation of the story. And I want to have fun with it this morning. And so I'm going to share with you a story of Jesus, a parable that Jesus talked about called the parable of the tares. Has anybody ever heard of that one? I have not. And so I'm going to share that with you, and then we're going to do a metaphysical interpretation. Now, for those of you that are fairly new to Unity, the thing that makes Unity a little bit different is that while we appreciate the Bible in terms of the literal context, we also believe that the Bible has a whole different level. It's called the metaphysical level, which means we believe that the Bible is a story about our own spiritual unfoldment and awakening, and that it can be interpreted differently. And that when you interpret it different, all of a sudden you realize the people, the places, the things, the animals, all the things in the Bible have another meaning about our own spiritual unfoldment and awakening. And when you interpret the Bible like that, everything changes. Literally everything changes when you read the Bible. And it doesn't mean that we take away from the stories or anything else like that. It just means there's a whole nother level that you can play with and have fun with. And if there's anything I love to do with my spirituality, it is to have fun. Because if it's not fun, why are you doing it? Right? So, let's talk about the parable of the tares. The kingdom of heaven, and this is Jesus talking, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man that sowed good seeds in his field, her field. But while the person slept, their enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the blades sprang up and brought forth wheat, then appeared the tares also. And then the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, do you not sow good seeds in thy field? Why then are there tares? And he said unto them, an enemy hath done this. And the servants said unto him, Do you want us to go and gather them up? But he said, No, because while you gather up the tares, you may root up the wheat with them. He goes on to say, Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather up first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. There you go. Riveting, right? Everyone's going like, come on, seriously? What's up with that? All right, this is where it gets cool. Now, metaphysical interpretation, there is actually a process that you go through. So the first thing that you do whenever you're interpreting something metaphysically is you pull out the names, the places, the people, all the stuff. And you go use the metaphysical dictionary to interpret it. Now, the metaphysical dictionary is actually a book, but there's a place online where you can do this much faster and much easier. Truthunity.net is where you can go and type in anything you want regarding metaphysical interpretations, and bam, there it is. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go look at all the little different parts of that story. And even though it's a short story, there's a lot of different parts to it, right? So, we're going to start off with the kingdom of heaven. That's where it starts, right? Now, it says, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man that sowed good seeds in his field, but while he slept, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat and went away. So, the kingdom of heaven. Unity believes that the kingdom of heaven is not someplace up there. Unity believes the kingdom of heaven is actually what? And a state of mind. Unity believes that the kingdom of heaven is a state of mind. A really good state of mind. Love, harmony, connection, all those good things, right? So there's the kingdom of heaven, right? It's a state of mind, a really good state of mind. And then the saying goes on, it says, sowed good seeds in his field. Sowing. What does that mean? Bringing or calling forth. It's something done by who? Us. We sow. We bring it forth. We're the ones that are doing that. Okay? And then it goes on to say good seeds. What are good seeds? Well, metaphysically, good seeds are our thoughts. So good seeds are our thoughts. So when Jesus says a person sows good seeds, really what he's saying is they're bringing forth good ideas and good positive thoughts. Okay? And then he says, in his field. What does a field metaphysically represent? Right here. Your mind. In your mind. Right? Everybody hanging with me? How we doing? You tracking? All right, I promise you we will bring this together, right? All right. But then he says something really interesting. He says, but while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat and went away. Huh? All right. When a man slept, when a person sleeps, they are unconscious. They are not thinking. They're not paying attention to their thoughts. They are not awake. They are unconscious. So as a man sleeps. And then he says, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. Who's the enemy? Metaphysically, the enemy is our ego. That's who the enemy is. It's our ego. I'm going to take a little bit of a side thing over here. When we talk about unity, we're talking about you can use one or two different minds. You can use your egoic mind, that's one way you can live your life, or you can use your Christ mind, right? The enemy, metaphysically, represents the egoic mind. All sense consciousness, all sense. There's nothing about Christ or Christ consciousness when you're using your egoic mind, okay? So the enemy is sense consciousness. Now, everybody's been going, what is this whole tare thing, Mike? What's that all about? A tare are basically worthless weeds. In fact, some biblical scholars would say that they're poisonous. So what does a tare represent metaphysically? It represents destructive thoughts. That's what a tare is. Metaphysically, it is a destructive thought. And again, what does wheat represent? The opposite of that. Wheat is good, positive thoughts. That's what the wheat represents in the story metaphysically. And then it goes on to say, so this ego thing showed up, but then, and it left the tares, right? And then it went away. Well, I don't understand this. So what this is really saying metaphysically is that as you start to do your own work, that what will happen is when you're not paying attention, that the ego will start to plant these poisonous thoughts, these tares, into your mind. That's how it works when you're not paying attention. So there's kind of like, as you start this process, what starts to happen is there's this back and forth between these two thoughts. The good positive thoughts, and then you've got the egoic or the negative thoughts. Has anybody that's started to do the dance, the metaphysical dance, ever experienced that? Anybody that has played this game knows exactly what I'm talking about right now, because that's what happens. That is part of spiritual maturity, and it's a part of spiritual growth. You just have to go through that phase. That's what happens when you start doing this little dance we're talking about. And so you sit there and you work on all these positive thoughts, and you're really trying to do a good job, and then guess what? These little other thoughts over here are going to show up. That's normal. There is nothing wrong with you. That is part of the process. It's the part of maturing spiritually, right? And so what's funny is, then the servants ask them, well, do you want us to go gather these tares? Do you want us to go metaphysically, what's happening? Do you want us to go get all those bad thoughts? And it's really fascinating, because in the parable, he says, no, don't do that, because you may root up the wheat with them. What? Shouldn't we want to do that? And the answer is, eventually you will want to do that. But at first, it can be extremely difficult. And so there's this thing that's happening. And so instead of worrying about, well, I just got to go get rid of all these negative thoughts, why don't we instead focus on positive thoughts? Because I would argue that while you just start this process off, it's extremely difficult, because a lot of the negative thoughts that we have are where? They're in our subconscious mind. Question for you, do you know the thoughts that are in your subconscious mind? The answer is no. Huh? What do you mean, I don't know all my subconscious thoughts? No, you don't. They're in your subconscious mind. And yet, those subconscious thoughts are ruling your life. They control everything that you do, you don't do. It controls everything. And at first, it's not easy to get into those subconscious thoughts. Okay? So, then Jesus talks in the parable, he talks about the time of the harvest. When is the time of the harvest? It's when you've spiritually matured. So as you start to grow up and you start to practice this stuff and you start to spiritually mature, then all of a sudden you have sufficient spiritual understanding, practice, experiences that you can finally look at the difference between the negative thoughts and the positive thoughts, and then you can start doing something about the negative thoughts and getting rid of those. We'll talk about that in a minute, and then you can keep the positive thoughts, and you can safely make the separation. And the way that we do that is, in unity, in order for us to get rid of the negative thoughts, we use something called the opposite of those. What's that? Prayer? Yeah, I think affirmations. What's the opposite of affirmations? Thank you. Thank you. So the way that we get rid of the negative thoughts is we use denials, the terrors, and then the way that we use positive thoughts is affirmations. The basics of all unity teachings, affirmations and denials. That's the things that helps us work on our mind, right? All right. So that was the first crack at it. How'd we do? We got more work to do, but are we okay? All right, so you're tracking me. Good. All right. So what happens is, after you pull all the little pieces together, then you kind of go through this process, which we're not doing today, where you really spend time within prayer and thought, and then you kind of put together the pieces, and then you lay the story out in terms of what is it really trying to tell us metaphysically. So I'm not going to go through that whole verse again, but do you remember how when you first heard it, you're like falling asleep and I'm having to, hey, wake up because that's the way it is? Okay, now listen to this from a spiritual level. Listen to the final interpretation. When we are awake and using our own Christ mind, we call forth positive thoughts into our consciousness by using affirmations. When we are not aware and we're not paying attention, our ego places negative thoughts and ideas into our consciousness. Well, and then the question becomes, well, okay, but should we try to get rid of all the egoic thoughts then? Is that what we should do when we start this process? And the answer is no, you shouldn't. Because at first it's going to be hard to separate out the two. And instead of trying to focus on all the negative stuff, why don't we just instead focus on the positive stuff when we first get started? So instead, focus on putting the positive thoughts into your consciousness by using affirmations. And by doing so, you'll eventually be able to identify and remove the negative thoughts from your ego by using denials. So, a little bit of a difference between the two interpretations, the two readings. Do you see how fun it can get when you do metaphysical interpretation? You can take any story in the Bible and do a metaphysical interpretation, and there's going to be some deeper spiritual lesson in there for you. So if the Bible is your thing, awesome. And you don't want to take it any further, you don't have to. But if you want to take it further, there are spiritual lessons when you do metaphysical interpretation that are there for you when you do it. And that's, to me, where the Bible comes alive to me again. It's brought new life and new power and new passion in reading it. All right, so there is the farmer. There is the farmer planting his seeds. He's now got the seeds. He's figured out what he's wanted. He's playing with his ego, and he's playing with his Christ consciousness. He's doing with this thing. So now the seeds are in the soil. The seeds are there. So what is the next thing the farmer does? He blesses the seeds. He blesses them. She blesses them. They bless the seeds. And so when you're creating whatever it is that you want to create, after you go through this process, and you figured out what you want to plant, and now you've done everything to plant them, cleaning up your mind, now what do? We bless them. We bless them. It's really simple, right? And then what? There's two more things. And this is where I can tell you, me personally did not fully understand this. You've done all this stuff to create this thing in your life. You've taken the time, you've done the research, you've figured it out, you've blessed everything, and now guess what you got to do? You got to let it go. Surrender. Surrender. Why? The reason you need to surrender it is because it's thy will be done. Thy will be done. We can become so obsessed with a goal, we can become so obsessed with something that we become control freaks. Does anybody here know anybody that's a control freak? Yeah, I used to be one. And I would try and control every single thing in every single minute of my existence. That's what I would try to do. And guess what? I almost went crazy making sure everything would happen the way that I thought it would happen. There's just one problem with it. And that is, there is your plan, and there is the plan. And there will be times in your life, and every single one of our lives, where the two don't match. They don't match. If you can understand that, and it doesn't mean you're right or wrong, it doesn't mean you're good or bad, it doesn't mean that you can't create a life that you want to create. It just means that what you're doing is you're turning it over into the hands of God when you surrender it. And you say, hey, God, this is my thought, this is my idea, this is kind of what I'd love to create. But you know what? I just want to make it sure it's for the highest and best good of myself and the highest and best good of everybody else that's out there. So I'm going to surrender it into your hands. I'm going to keep moving forward, but I'm surrendering it into your hands and I'm letting go of it. And by the way, God, if this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, just let me know. Just let me know. And so we surrender it. Thy will be done. And then we do one last thing. We move forward in faith. We move forward in faith. So we call in the third power, the power of faith, because you've done everything that you could possibly do. You've surrendered it into the hands of God. And now we move forward in faith. Yes, my best intentions are going to have this thing come forward, believing that what you have planted, if you will bloom and grow into what it is that you planted. Those seeds will start to sprout. We do it in faith. We do it in faith. From the book, Your God-Given Potential, Winifred Hausman says that faith is that quality in us which enables us to look past the appearance of lack, limitation, or difficulty, to take hold of the divine ideas and believe in it, even though we don't see any evidence of it except in our mind. Through faith, we know with an inner knowing the truth that is not yet expressed in our manifested work. The metaphysical meaning of faith, the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. It is spiritual assurance. Spiritual assurance. The power to do the seemingly impossible. And remember, when we call forth these powers, you evoke the powers. I claim my power of faith now. I claim my power of whichever one of the 12 powers you want to use, you call it forth. Why? Because you've got all kinds of power behind you, but until you evoke it, it might as well just sit there. It's kind of like having something that you plug into the wall, but you never plug it into the wall. It's not going to work. And it doesn't mean you don't have access to it, it's just you got to plug into it. Well, how do you plug into your 12 powers? You evoke them. You call them forth. I claim my power of faith now. That's how you evoke the 12 powers. And there's more than 12 powers, by the way. I got to say that. So anyways, in terms of wrapping up the idea of the spiritual lessons of faith, of spring, excuse me. Again, we're in the process of creation. How often do you create in your life? Pretty much every day. Every single day, you're in the process of creation. You're a co-creator with God. Here's the choice. You can either do that unconsciously if you want to, and there's no judgment there, or you can do it consciously. My suggestion is the party is right here. The party is when you start to do it consciously. That's where the fun is, right? We can evoke the 12 powers to assist us. And throughout the rest of the seasons, the summer and the fall and the winter, we're going to be pulling in the rest of the 12 powers because it's magical the way they all fit into each one of the seasons. It's pretty cool, actually. We get to use these spiritual principles called affirmations and denials. For what? To get rid of our stinking thinking, our limited beliefs, the things that hold us back, the things that tell us we can't do things, the things that tells us that we're victims and we're powerless and we have nothing to say about what happens in our life. All of that garbage we can do something about. We don't have to just sit there and take it. We are actually so powerful, beyond understanding. And when you start to get a grasp of that, and all of a sudden you say, wow, there's some things I can do with my life, things get really powerful, can change. Then we bless, we surrender, and then we move forward in faith. So, your assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to now start living your life powerfully. Is to understand that you're a powerful creator. You are a powerful creator. You can create anything in your life. I don't care if you're 12 or if you're 112. You can still create in your life. You have the ability to do that. There are limitless things that we can do. Limitless things that we can do. My experience has been the more I start stepping into that power and understanding, it just makes life a lot easier. It just does. I was over here for a long time in my life. I struggled. And what I realize now is there was no need for it. None. But there's some work that I needed to do. There's work. There's work. When you finally decide I'm going to awaken, all of a sudden you're going to have stuff that starts to show up for you. And by the way, it might look a little bit different than the way it did for me. That's okay. But there's work to be done. But I'm just telling you, and I hope you hear this, you are so worth it. You are so worth it because of who and what you are. You are a brilliant light of the divine. Every single one of you. I am beyond honored, humbled, blown away by your light. One of my greatest blessings is to get up here and get to look at all your faces all at one time. It is beyond incredible, beautiful. You are magnificent in your light. You are so needed right now. You are needed. We are needed to bring your gifts, to bring your message, to bring that expression into this world. That's why you're here, folks. That's why we're here, folks. So, having said that, I love you. I am so beyond grateful that you're here. Thank you for coming here and spending a little bit of time with us this morning. Just thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless.